Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today we will be talking about a novel from a local Malaysian author, Shamini Flint. If you are familiar with that name, she is the author of the crime series Inspector Singh. In this video, we will be specifically talking about her debut, Inspector Singh Investigates a Most Peculiar Malaysian Murder. Now, despite this being her debut, this is actually not my first Inspector Singh book. The first one that I actually read is the Cambodian Mystery. My general score for this one, for the Cambodian Mystery, is actually quite good. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, and it got some really powerful and heartbreaking stuff in there. The uniqueness of the Inspector Singh series is, number 1, the physical description of the titular inspector, and number 2 is his disdain for literally everything, which is going to play a big factor of discussion later on. Each installment tells its own self-contained stories. However, it will be a plus since there are still references to the other books as a way to cement that connection without forcing it on the reader's head. Also, I must say that I can see how Shamini Flint improves as a writer because, boy, this first one is definitely not as good as the other ones. So the series revolves around an inspector from Singapore who got dragged into this high-profile international cases as a reason for diplomacy and international relations between police forces. Who is Inspector Singh, you ask me? He is a fat Sikh. It's not an insult, that's his physical description, and the story won't stop reminding you of it. His personality doesn't fit with the Singaporean police force culture, so they send him to cases anywhere but Singapore. The goal of the police force is just to keep him out of trouble because he seems to be like a danger magnet or something. What makes this different from other crime fiction is of course the inspector himself. As I've mentioned, his physique did not match with other detectives or inspectors of the same genre that I have watched or read. Plus, it doesn't help with his constant grumbling of like literally everything, like a geriatric with Alzheimer's, minus the Alzheimer's, but with asthma and possibly even heart attack risk. It definitely adds a little depth to his character. But more about his character later. Now let's talk about the Malaysian murder mystery. It all started with the murder of timber businessman Alan Lee, and the main suspect is his ex-wife Chelsea Liu, and she's also convicted. The problem is, Chelsea is Singaporean and the murder happens in Malaysian soil. So Inspector Singh along with Inspector Muhammad and Sergeant Syukur from Malaysia got together to crack this case. There's also the issue of child custody at hand and some very inspired by real life cases. Personally, I think Shamini Flint handled it well. At the same time, there's also a subplot of a man, Rupert Winfield, fighting illegal loggers from Lee Timber under Kian Min's instruction. Other characters include Inspector Muhammad, Alan Lee's siblings, Kian Min and Jasper Lee, Chelsea's 3 children, with Marcus being the eldest, and the younger 2 that I can't remember their names. The story gets into POV of various characters, so it creates the illusion of transparency since we're not just looking at the story from the investigative eye. I'm actually having a hard time talking about this in chronological order since a lot actually occurs. At this point, there will be mild spoilers, so you have been warned. So Chelsea has been abused by her husband for years, and his murder puts her high up on the suspect list. And then there's also the younger brother Kian Min, who pretends to be timid but is actually eyeing for the chairman seat. The eldest brother, Jasper, is also a possible suspect. Not because of the company though, it's because he lets his inheritance go to pursue a much more eco-friendly goal. But he's also a suspect because he's been in love with Chelsea since she married his brother. And there's also another guy who is like Chelsea's brief fling, Ravi. He doesn't matter that much, but he adds a little bit of red herring into Chelsea's character to make us doubt her. Ravi is a gold digger who is out to bait Chelsea. Chelsea has been fighting for divorce prior to the murder, but Alan is a real douchebag. To get back at his ex, Alan go to the extreme length by converting into Islam because he wants to use the religion against her. So this makes it really difficult for Chelsea to gain custody over her children since she's not a Muslim. And under the Sharia law, if a parent of children below 18 becomes a Muslim, the child will automatically become one and will be legally raised by the Muslim parent. So I've done some reading on this issue, and however I'm still a bit on the fence about this. So I've included links to some articles in the description regarding a very real life case that is probably inspired the story between Chelsea Liu and Alan Lee. And maybe that would help give you some clarification on this issue, because I personally think it's very serious. So yeah, do check them out. So yeah, Alan is a real douchebag, even using religion to mess with his ex-wife beyond the grave. Now, me being a Muslim, if this happens, I'm not going to acknowledge that. That man is a vindictive, narcissistic abuser. He is not welcome to the club. The story addresses how delicate the situation has become, not just from Chelsea's POV, but as a mother who is also about to lose her children, and I feel sorry for her. But at the same time, it's also very complicated from the law perspective as well. There is a section in the story where it shows the council is discussing on Alan's status as a Muslim, and they're very much aware of Alan Lee's reputation as not a good man. But due to the nature of this case, their hands are tied, and this case will be a precedent for everyone to doubt the sincerity of conversion even after the person is dead, and it will create further complication. Even worse, since everything that Alan did about the conversion has been legal, and really nothing can be contradicted, not even his promiscuity. There's even to a point where Chelsea was forced into a dilemma. Her Sharia lawyer suggested for her to convert as well. She admitted to actually considering, but it would mean that Alan had managed to control her life even in death. And for this, I support Chelsea. The issue of faith mixed with domestic abuse is really a topic of good discussion. Religion is a serious matter and not something to be forced into, and certainly not to be used as a tool to manipulate people. The way the story unfolds is actually quite effective. Everyone's a suspect, and I suspect everyone, especially Chelsea, even though we started the story being on her side. But as soon as she got out, you will feel sus a little bit over her transformation. But deep down, you're still trying to rationalize her decisions because of what she's been through. There were other characters revealed in the later parts. For instance, Alan's very, very, very young lover, Sharifah, who is also the cause of a twisted love triangle between Alan, his son Marcus, and of course, Sharifah herself. I might be wrong about this, but if I'm not mistaken, Marcus is not even 18 yet, and he and Sharifah were classmates, so it makes Alan's a pedophile. Yeah, no. And then there's Chelsea's biggest simp since day one, Jasper, of course. This simp of a man, he's so much of a simp that he initially confessed to the crime, only to ended up revoking his fake confession when Singh manipulated him by telling him about Ravi. But for now, let's look at Inspector Singh. You're gonna see him complain about a lot of stuff. The environment, the city, the system, literally everything that everyone except for food and one person in particular. I guess this is Shamini's attempt at creating a Noir-esque detective character who hates everything and looks at the world in disdain. And like all the Noir detectives, they all have weaknesses for beautiful women. After reading 3 books in the series, you'll notice every single time there's a beautiful woman as part of the list of suspects, Inspector Singh will be like, no, she can't be the killer, she's too beautiful to do such thing. You'll see that in the Cambodian mystery as well. But Chelsea Liu pleaded with him, urged him to believe that he was the only one who could help, that if he turned his back on her, she would have nowhere else to go. She appealed to his dormant masculinity. It was a long time, the inspector thought, since any woman had made him feel needed. Men. He was even called out for it by the other inspector, and it will be a pattern for him in the other books. But how about the other inspector? Well, Inspector Muhammad and Sergeant Shukor is a good addition to the Singh team. Inspector Muhammad is described as handsome, and for some reason I picture him like a jail's character, where Sergeant Shukar is like the green young officer that is constantly being ordered around by the other two. And I thought that, they actually have a really good dynamic. So now let's look at the culture and the place. There were plenty of references to real-life cases in Malaysia. For example, the part where the deputy police at the time punched Anwar Ibrahim, who was the deputy prime minister at the time. The character Rupert Winfield is a stand for Bruno Manser, the Swiss activist who stayed with the Penan tribe and organized several timber blockades. There are also commentary on the corruption going on in regards to illegal logging, and they also mention the yearly haze problem, like, Malaysia ku. One of the things that we picked apart during the KL discussion was his disdain for the environment, especially KL. Everyone was so triggered by how Singh views KL as this dirty city with mud and grime and dust and heat, which is, well, true on some level, but he made it look like as if KL is some sort of post-apocalyptic wasteland. He looked around. The entire city had the feel of a place where contracts for upkeep and beautification were handed out to companies with connections rather than competence. The pavement on which he stood had been relaid with shaped tiles intended to create floral patterns. Most were cracked, some were missing. Tiles were unevenly laid or had popped up under the intense sun. It was impossible to walk along and think. Every moment he had to be spent avoiding twisting an ankle. Now, I don't know which churro he is referring to, but KL is not that bad. Aside from the recent flood and traffic jams, I like KL. I really do. Now let's look at the characters in the mystery, alright? Looking at the mystery itself, there's a lot of red herring here and there, minus filler characters like Mr. Chan, who is Chelsea's PI, Ravi, Chelsea's boy toy, and Singh's sister. The suspects for me were Chelsea, Marcus, Jasper, Rupert, Kianmin, and Shaifa. She's like literally everyone. I'm gonna rank the characters in terms of who I think is the murderer, my initial suspicion. So number 1, we have Chelsea. Although Chelsea is the biggest suspect, especially after all that she's been through, but I wouldn't feel bad if she actually was the one who killed Alan. And then number 2, we have Marcus. He might have had the second biggest motive, considering his father literally steal his girlfriend, and also he was the witness to his father's abuse to his mother all this time. It will mess any young man's mind. Number 3, we have Jasper. Obviously, because of his feelings for Chelsea, considering how much we see from his POV, it's really not surprising. But Jasper's level of simping for me was really detestable. But the moment when Singh told him about Chelsea's boy toy, he recants and what did he expect? That she's gonna be so thankful to him and remain single forever? It made his sacrifice feel very superficial. Number 4, we have Sharifa. When we first saw her, she got this sus vibe. Maybe it's just Singh's dormant masculinity tingling, and the motive is not clear considering Alan is her gold mine and she traded the son for that. But it still might be possible since Sharifa said that Alan started to abuse her as well, so it's really not surprising. Plus, it will be cool to have her as the killer since he is depicted as young and innocent. Well, not so much innocent if you chose the father of the son, but yeah. Number 5, we have Rupert. I barely mention him because his subplot is the farthest from the story. His appearance started by being part of a timber blockade and witnessed a pregnant Penan woman killed during the event. As you get it, the people behind the illegal logging he witnessed is from Lee Timber. I feel like Shamini Flint had to awkwardly connect this subplot with the main plot, and the moment it finally connects, to me, it just feels really forced. Aside from Jasper, Rupert did not interact with the other MCs at all. Even as I'm making notes of this video, I almost forgot about him. Rupert's connection is like when you're trying to introduce someone as a friend of a cousin sort of thing, Like Rupert and Jasper are partnered in crime fighting against illegal logging. That's how they're connected. And number 6, we have Kianmin. Kianmin is one of the main characters, but like I said, he is a classic villain. And there's always that one character that who seems like the most vile but he's not the killer. So it would actually be shocking to make him the killer. So now let's talk about the third act. This is for me where the story truly picked up. Major spoilers ahead, you've been warned. I mentioned that Chelsea hired Mr. Chan, the PI, to gather evidence against Alan. Ironically, the very thing that she did to fight for her children's custody is also the very same thing that caused her to lose her son Marcus. Don't worry, he's not dead. Chelsea forgot to pay Mr. Chan for his work, so he sold the video of Marcus and Alan fighting over Sharifah to the news. The humiliation was so unbearable for Marcus, causing him to try to commit suicide. He fell into a medically induced coma due to brain injury, and during that period, he turned 18 in a hospital. Rupert, on the other hand, managed to get to Kian Min by pretending to be a businessman, and finally revealed that the reason why he is so invested in this because the pregnant woman that died in the beginning was his wife, and that he finally kills Kian Min with a poisoned needle. Meanwhile, the final verdict for Alan is finally out, and things are not going good for Chelsea. So her plan is that she escapes with her two younger kids, since Marcus just turned 18 and he has Sharifah, so she's leaving him behind. Rupert told Jasper about Kian Min, and Jasper's response by telling him the thing he has told us before, that he actually killed Alan. His first confession was actually the truth. So things would have been over much sooner if he didn't fall for Singh's tactics actually. He decided to take the blame for Kian Min's murder. His actions ultimately protect Chelsea, Rupert, and his cause to protect the Penang tribe. The true ending is, however, something that I really love about this series. There is always this feeling of gray area here, and that justice is not always black and white. Inspector Muhammad managed to figure out that Rupert was the one who killed Kian Min because of the confession letter he left behind. However, after talking with Jasper about it, he thinks it's best for everyone to remove the letter altogether, and in this way, everyone got the ending that they deserved. So, to conclude, Inspector Singh Malaysia is a decent debut, and I like how it shows Shamini Flint has grown as an author. As a Malaysian, I love how the settings really feels close to home, but at the same time, I can't help but Shamini tries to squeeze in too many Malaysian dirty laundry at a time to point that it really feels a bit show-offy of the knowledge. Inspector Singh series for me is a fresh take on crime thrillers and murder mystery with a tinge of cynicism and well-placed humor without sacrificing emotion. Even the inspectors have some sort of relationship and character arc with Singh as they grow and share some sentiment towards the end, especially during the time when Singh and Inspector Muhammad decided to let Chelsea and her children go to Singapore and escape to Australia. I think that they really do deserve that ending. That was Inspector Singh, A Most Peculiar Malaysian Murder by Shamini Flint. So yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!